you don't know me, I'm Lee Shuster, and I'm hosting today's Summer Forum. This is the third in our series, in our 2023 series of 10 programs. Thank you all for coming out on this glorious holiday weekend. It's great to see all your smiling faces. Whether you're here in attendance or joining us virtually, I'd like to cover just some simple housekeeping rules. One, our format, if you're here for the first time, is we have a guest speaker, presents a informative program that I think you'll find electrifying today. Bad pun, sorry about that. And then we'll do our offertory, and then following the offertory, we will go into a Q&A session, and just one simple little request about Q&A. I want to remind everybody to please wait for one of our greeters to bring a wireless mic to you. And that's important for two reasons. One, we have people in the building using hearing assistance devices, and those don't work if you don't get on mic. Secondarily, our virtual crowd on Zoom can't hear your question unless you're on mic, so please be respectful, and anybody in Elliott Hall on our closed circuit TV will be able to hear you as well. So thank you very much for honoring that request. I think that's everything we need to talk about as far as housekeeping. We do have a small tradition here of lighting the chalice, so I'm going to light the chalice, and I have a few words to share with you after the chalice is lit. I wanted to find an appropriate reading for today, and I found inspiration, of all places, from my soulmate, Linda Smith. She's our family's environmental justice warrior. And here's a poem she wrote entitled Heat. Heat. It's not tasty hot. Hot sauce. Hot and sour, hot and spicy, hot dog. It's not upbeat hot. Hot rod, hot hand, hot streak, hot pants, hot mama, or hot to trot. It's not even important hot, like a hot button issue or a strike when the iron is hot. Nope, it's awful hot. Hot as hell, in hot water, too hot to handle. A cat on a hot tin roof? It's drought hot, desert hot, burning the soles of my feet hot. Global warming, global change, crisis, catastrophe hot. It's hot town somewhere in the city, back of my neck getting dirt and gritty. Some of you are old enough to remember that song. Hot without pity. Please, let's turn down the heat. So I'd like to introduce our guest speaker today. Kevin Emerson is a member of the First Unitarian Church of Salt Lake and grew up in this congregation. In addition to being a father, a gardener, a wildflower lover, and a frequent bicycle commuter, Kevin is the Director of Building Efficiency and Decarbonization for Utah Clean Energy, where he has worked over the last 16 years. Kevin is highly qualified to talk to us today. He holds a BS degree in environmental studies from the University of Utah. Go Utes! And he has a Master of Science in Environmental Sustainability from the University of Edinburgh. Please welcome Kevin Emerson.
Good morning. Thank you, Lee. And Linda, thank you for giving Lee the permission to share your prose. It was inspiring and very timely. It's so nice to be with you. So as Lee said, I grew up in this congregation. I've been in this room so many times. I don't think I've been up here since probably college, maybe high school when, we did the high school stuff. So it's been a long time, but it's really nice to be back. So as Lee mentioned, and as you saw in the program, I'm going to be talking about, what we can do in our homes to address climate change and be part of the solution. So in today's presentation, I'm going to review how I think of decarbonizing our homes, and I'll get into what that means in a minute, in 4 steps. So the 4 steps of decarbonization. And importantly, I'm going to be highlighting a number of federal incentives that are greatly expanded, and a lot of them are actually new, that can help us along the way. And I'm going to give you a glimpse of what tax credits or rebates you might qualify for as well. So I wanted to ask first, I've been part of this community. I grew up in the Salt Lake Valley. As Lee mentioned, for a long time, I've worked for this local organization, Utah Clean Energy. Is anyone here familiar with Utah Clean Energy? Oh, that's great. I see quite a few hands. I'm kind of surprised. Well, we are a mission-driven organization. We exist solely to help Utah accelerate the transition to climate-smart ways of living. I'll tell you more about that in a sec. We're based in Salt Lake City. Our office is actually just over in the Avenues. We're actually retrofitting an existing building for a new office downtown, which I'd love to tell you about at some point, and host tours for anyone who's interested when it's built. We'll be in the space next March. We have a staff of 14, and we are an advocacy-focused organization. So our work is focused on getting to zero emissions in Utah in 4 areas. One is reducing emissions in homes and buildings. The second is transportation electrification, whether or not that means making it easier to get, a Nissan Leaf if you're looking for a new vehicle, or access electric vehicle charging infrastructure, or helping medium and heavy duty vehicles, such as all the fleets out there, buses, the vans dropping things off at folks' homes, to even things like garbage trucks, helping to make sure those vehicles, which are highly polluting, can also become electrified more rapidly. Third, we work on transitioning our electric grid, so we move off of fossil fuels to generate electricity and adopt more and more renewables. And fourth, we're also focused on climate leadership. We're a nonpartisan organization, nonprofit, and very mission-driven. And with a focus on climate change, we don't believe we're going to be tackling climate change effectively if we can't talk about it. And in a very, overall in a very conservative state like Utah, we're finding innovative, creative ways to help grow the conversation amongst a lot of the players here in Utah to talk about climate change so we can actually address it comprehensively. So, as I mentioned, as you read on the slide, hopefully, Utah Clean Energy works to create a future that ensures healthy, thriving communities for all, empowered and sustained by clean energy. And there's a lot of things we have to do to make this vision a reality, and I'm going to be talking about just a little bit of it. So, if you'd be willing, I invite you to imagine what a pollution-free community might look like. Imagine that our homes and our schools, our offices, our churches, and other buildings are highly energy efficient, really meaning that we waste as little energy as possible. Imagine that rooftop solar is on most every home and building. Imagine that our appliances all transition off of gas combustion and use electricity very efficiently. Imagine that buildings have their own batteries to store power generated by the sun, and that electric vehicle chargers are common, and it's easy to plug in and charge up using renewable energy. And finally, imagine that all of those power plants that are out beyond our community, they're not burning coal, they're not burning natural gas, They're using heat from in the earth, or they're using solar, or they're using the wind's power to generate electricity. This vision of a pollution-free community is even more important today as we navigate continuing, although improving, local air quality challenges, also a threatened Great Salt Lake, and the continued impacts of climate change on wildfires. You're probably all familiar with winter inversions that lead to bad air quality in the winter months. We're also having to deal with more and more summertime air quality challenges, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, through ozone pollution. We're also projected here as a state, where we're located geographically, Utah's modeled to warm, and we're seeing it right now. We're warming a lot faster than some parts of the country. And that's due to climate change. And as we're all very well aware, that has some big impacts on our valley, our air quality, the Great Salt Lake, the millions of migratory birds that rely on the lake. And this warming can also impact all of us, especially those who are vulnerable in our community, who don't have access to comfortable cooling and things in those really hot summer months. So these are challenging times, to be sure. To meet the global carbon reduction goals that most every country working together have adopted, and to keep the global temperature increase in kind of a healthy, not too damaging bound, we need to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And that's only going to be possible if we reach certain milestones by 2030. So the 2020s, for this reason, are being called the climate decade. And this is where the Inflation Reduction Act comes in. By show of hands, who has heard of the Inflation Reduction Act? Okay, I'm not surprised. Give the audience. This is a really groundbreaking, historic, and transformative investment in climate solutions in our country, passed last August. The goal of the Inflation Reduction Act, and there are so many parts of it, I'm just going to scratch the surface with a couple parts that I'm talking about that relate to our homes. But the goal of the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, is to help decarbonize our society and really help reach these climate goals that we need to reach. I've already said decarbonization a few times. It probably is implied what it means, but basically decarbonizing is that vision that I was talking about. Using energy really efficiently, moving off of combustion of fossil fuels to power our economy, and using clean, renewable energy, and being able to store it. So as I mentioned, IRA, or the Inflation Reduction Act, provides historic levels of funding for energy and climate change programs, climate solutions programs. The total investment is $385 billion. There's $48 billion that's targeted to homes and commercial buildings. There's another if you slice the pie a different way, there's $43 billion focuses on individual tax credits. And another $32 billion it will go to grants to private entities, including individuals, as well as entities like churches. And this is my, what I'm going to be talking about, this is my most up-to-date understanding of the many, many parts of this law. Federal guidance is continually coming out, but this will give you a really good sense of what we know today and kind of what's to come. I have to say, since I will be talking about tax credits, I'm in no way a tax professional. If you're interested in like this is going to work well for my home, talk to your a tax professional to confirm some of the details and how it would apply to your specific situation. So hopefully this building is familiar. This is not a shot that we're used to seeing our church home from, but I just want to, before I get into the details, I just want to really recognize that we're already on track on the decarbonization journey, if you will, here at First Church. One, I want you to keep in mind that there are parallels to what I'm going to be sharing about our homes. There are parallels in the Inflation Reduction Act that will apply to our church. Tax credits that actually nonprofits can take, even though we're tax exempt, and also rebate programs. And those are going to be critical to facilitate this net zero transition that Lee queued up a number of weeks back. And thank you, Lee. And so keep that in mind. And as I already kind of mentioned, we're on this decarbonization journey already here, thanks in large part to Joan and other folks in the congregation who are involved in the environmental ministry. Thank you, Joan, for so many years of hard work on that. And the solar panels that we have here at First Church are just one of the many things that we can do. For those who don't know, we have 124 panels on the different roofs. We've generated almost 400 megawatt hours of electricity since they've been installed in 2012. And to put that into perspective, this is kind of a hard perspective, but that has offset almost 300 tons of carbon dioxide emissions, or avoided 300 tons of carbon dioxide emissions by using clean, pollution-free electricity from the sun since 2012. And that's a big deal. Okay, so let's shift back to decarbonizing your home and saving is really the theme for this morning. I'm going to walk you through the 4 steps as I see it to decarbonizing our homes, and then to tell you about which tax credits or rebates that will soon be available. Which of those are available at each step of kind of the 4 decarbonization steps. So the steps that I'm going to be talking through are, the first step is reducing energy waste and improving efficiency. The second step is electrifying as much as we can and moving away from fossil fuels in our homes. The third step is driving electric. And the last step is powering our homes with clean energy, and importantly, considering the use of energy storage in our homes. And there's a whole conversation just about why storage is so important. So we won't be able to get too much into it, but I'll be talking about what rebates and things are available for that as well. So there are 5 tax credits or rebate programs that I'm going to talk about in a little bit, and kind of pair them with these 4 steps for decarbonizing our homes. The rebates and tax credits are either new or greatly expanded. They may have been on the books for a number of years, but not in the state that they are in right now. They're greatly expanded, and I'll tell you more about how they're expanded in just a bit. But these are the ones I'm going to go through. The tax credit for existing energy-efficient home improvements, a home improvement rebate program, and a home electrification and appliance rebate program, which are kind of in their own category because they're not available yet. I'm going to be talking about tax credits for new and used electric vehicles, and then I'm going to be talking about the greatly expanded tax credit for residential clean energy. All of these, because of IRA or the Inflation Reduction Act, all of these are either available today and will be available for 10 years, or once they're up and running, they'll be available basically through the end of 2031, I think, so into 2032. So we have a 10-year window to think about decarbonizing our homes, and also that applies to what we do here at the church. So we don't have to spend too much time on this, but most of what I'm going to be talking about are tax credits. There are some rebates. As you're probably all aware, tax credits are claimed. This is all federal tax credits. There are some state tax credits as well, which I'm not going to get into, but the federal tax credits obviously are claimed when you file your federal taxes. The rebates aren't available yet, but what our understanding is that they'll be set up more as a point-of-sale rebate. So when you work with a contractor to put in a new, super efficient, all-electric heat pump for your heating and cooling your home, that contractor would provide that rebate to you. And these rebates are really significant, which we'll get into in a minute. When it comes to our homes and just the energy efficiency and electrification steps, so the first 2 steps, cutting energy waste and then moving off of fossil fuel combustion, there are 3 incentive programs: the energy efficient existing home improvement tax credit, and then the home efficiency rebates and the home electrification and appliance rebates. There's a lot of overlap. So you will actually, once the rebates are in place, you will be actually able to double dip. You could take the tax credit and a rebate for some of the same improvements in your home. So insulation, for example, you could take the tax credit, which I'll get into just a little bit more and tell you more kind of about the scale of the tax credit. You could take the tax credit and you could take a rebate, which just makes it a lot more economical to make these kind of improvements. And that's really the goal, again, of IRA. So the reason we start with reducing energy waste in our homes in terms of this decarbonization journey is that the cleanest source of energy is the energy we simply don't use. It's even cleaner than renewables. I like to think of them as not megawatts, but negawatts. So energy efficiency is the first step. And one reason why energy efficiency is also so important as the first step here in Utah is that while Utah has really low natural gas rates and electricity rates, if we don't make our homes efficient and if we don't use the energy efficiently, and we have an inefficient, maybe poorly insulated and leaky home, and we put on a high-performance heat pump for heating and cooling, we're not going to get the full value of that heat pump. So the first step is to optimize the efficiency in our home. That's especially important for some of the beneficiaries of these rebate programs, which, as I'll tell you about in a minute, are our low and moderate income community members. This law was passed with a huge environmental justice and climate justice focus and really supporting low and moderate income community members. And that's especially important for folks who have a high energy burden. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to talk about improving insulation, improved air tightness, replacing leaky windows and doors, and what are the tax credits or rebates available to help with this first step. The first tax credit program that has been on the books for at least a decade, but not in this state. It's been greatly expanded. It's called the Energy Efficient Home Improvement Tax Credit. It was made available January 1st of this year. It was extended, as I mentioned, through 2032. It focuses on existing homes. It can apply to homeowners and in some cases also renters. There is no income limit in terms of being eligible for this tax credit. Generally, and I'll get into this in more details about some of the specifics, but this is a 30% tax credit. So 30% of the cost of your home improvements can be taken as a credit. As I mentioned, this will be in place for 10 years. And the really cool thing about the rules around this is that you can take the max tax credit if you have improvements to make in your home and they meet the different some of the different criteria. You can take up to $3,200 per year for 10 years. So it's what's the right word? It's very exciting, and it's such a the scale of the tax credit is so much greater than it was previously. It's kind of it's game changing. That's the word I was looking for. Okay, so that's just kind of the high level of our tax credit, the existing home tax credit. Now this graphic shows you some of those elements that are eligible for the tax credits. So again, we're talking about 30% of the cost for things like an energy audit. That would just be having someone come do a walkthrough, tell you what are the greatest opportunities you have to improve energy efficiency and electrification in your home. Up to $150. Insulation and air sealing, 30% of the cost of that. 30% up to $600 per year for windows and skylights. And then 30% up to $500 for up to 2 exterior doors. And there's some rules, things like the windows have to be Energy Star labeled, the doors have to be Energy Star labeled, the level of insulation and air sealing have to take the home up to the current code or as close as you can with an existing home. But for this phase of the tax credit, insulation, air sealing, windows, doors, and an energy audit, you can claim a maximum of $1,200 per year. The second part of the tax credit helps us take the step into the electrification and kind of moving off of fossil fuels side of the equation. So the tax credit has been greatly expanded to provide a tax credit for heat pumps, which is kind of a weird name, but these are basically air conditioners that can also run in reverse and provide heating. Does anyone here have a heat pump installed? Oh, cool. Okay, so talk to them. They'll tell you about how they work. So heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, and electrical panel upgrades, if upgrades are needed to accommodate this type of equipment, it's all eligible in this expanded tax credit. And as I mentioned just a minute ago, there's a maximum of $1,200, 30% up to $1,200 for the energy efficiency improvements. But for this part of the tax credit, the max is $2,000. But the good news is you can combine those. And as I mentioned before, to get 30% of the cost of your improvements each year up to $3,200. I think previously it was less than $1,000 lifetime credit. So we have such a greater investment to really decarbonize and improve the efficiency of our homes through the expanded tax credit. Okay, I already mentioned that there are 2 rebate programs that are just as transformational, if not more so, than this existing home tax credit. I'm going to talk about 2 of those briefly and then let you know what the current status is of the launch of these rebate programs here in the state of Utah. So the first rebate program is called the Home Efficiency Rebates, kind of a nice, simple name. I should take a step back. Utah is slated to receive just over $100 million to implement rebate program, these 2 rebate programs here in Utah. Every state in the country received a formula allocation of funding for these programs. And this program specifically focuses on whole home energy efficiency. So if you get an energy audit and the auditor finds some big opportunities to cut your energy use by 35%, you'd be eligible for up to $8,000 per home for some of the same things that the tax credits will be eligible for. So insulation, air sealing, replacing windows, replacing doors, things like that. Now that $8,000 is the maximum amount for community members who meet low and moderate income caps. So the kind of the more moderate or average amount is $4,000. But that's $4,000 on top of the $3,200 per year tax credit. This program is not available yet, but the state's Office of Energy Development will be launching a program, and in my day job, we're working closely with the Office of Energy Development to make sure they get ready to launch this program and make it bold and ambitious and really accessible to the community members who really need it the most. So regarding the kind of low and moderate income, there's no cap for participating in this rebate program, but as I already alluded to, the value of the rebates double for community members who have who are 80% or below of the area median income. And that's the highlight I'll give about that one. That rebate program really focused on energy efficiency and reducing energy waste. This rebate program, called the Home Electrification and Appliance Rebate Program, focuses on electrifying our homes, and it's really focused on the equipment and appliances and electrical wiring and things. So this rebate program offers $7,000 per home, up to $14,000 for community members who are 80% or below area median income. And this one specifically, since it focuses on appliances like heat pumps and heat pump water heaters, induction cooking, heat pump clothes dryers, and electrical wiring. Well, apart from electrical wiring, it really focuses on appliances. And so we're anticipating that these rebates will be available to be taken at the point of sale, even at Lowe's or the other DIY shops. Again, this will be in place for 10 years once it's launched. We hope this program and the next program will be launched sometime in early 2024. One of our priorities, as an aside, is to work with, as I already mentioned, work with the Office of Energy Development, a state agency, to help launch this program and make sure it's really well thought through. And if you're interested, if you're not already on our newsletter, we're going to try to make it possible for community members to add their voice, to let the State Office of Energy Development know we really want the state to offer a really bold and transformative rebate program, pardon me, especially for those community members who really need and can stand to benefit the most from having these rebate programs in place. So you can sign up for our newsletter through this QR code or just go to our website, utahcleanenergy.org, and sign up. And we're going to let folks know when there is a window of opportunity to let the Office of Energy Development know that Utahns really support a bold and ambitious rebate program plan. Okay, so that's the first step of efficiency and electrifying our homes. Pardon me. After a home on this decarbonization journey, after the home has efficiency improvements and is gotten rid of the equipment that consumes natural gas, or gas as I like to call it, for heating and water heating, and uses efficient electric appliances, now it's time to think about installing EV chargers and investing in an electric vehicle. So IRA, or the Inflation Reduction Act, has been expanded in 3 ways: for new EVs, used EVs, and electric vehicle charging equipment. So the electric vehicle tax credit for new vehicles is the same, has the same maximum of $7,500. Let's see if I can move this over. Yeah. But there's a few caveats. So there's a few less vehicles that are eligible to receive this tax credit because I think for really good reasons, the Inflation Reduction Act said vehicles need to have a certain percentage of the battery made in the U.S. and critical minerals sourced from places that have better labor and trade practices. New in the electric vehicle tax credit this year also are, for the next 10 years, are price caps. So vehicles, sedans that are $55,000 and less are eligible for the tax credit, up to $7,500, or an SUV that's all electric is eligible for an $80,000, or for SUVs that are $80,000 or less in cost are also eligible for the tax credits. IRA also added income caps. So if you're an individual, the income cap to be eligible to take this tax credit of $7,500 for a new EV would be $150,000. $225,000 in household income for if you're a head of household, or $300,000 for joint filers. So if you make more than that, the thinking is you probably don't need the tax credit to invest in an electric vehicle. We have a link here on this slide, and these I'm happy to share these. Also on our website, we have a fact sheet that has direct links to the latest information directly from IRS. So there's a list of which vehicles are actually eligible for this new tax credit at the IRS website there. Previous to the Inflation Reduction Act, a used vehicle wouldn't receive any kind of incentive, but now it does. So the used electric vehicle tax credit is up to $4,000 or 30% of the price of the electric vehicle. And there's a few rules. The vehicle has to come from a dealer. So the dealer will have some kind of process to take that tax credit and apply the tax credit to the purchase price. The tax credit for the used vehicle can only be used once, so that's self-explanatory. There's also a vehicle price cap for this tax credit, which is $25,000 or lower. And then there's also income caps, and as you can see, the income caps are lower for this tax credit. And again, I think the thinking about this is that the idea is to help folks who really stand to benefit the most from being able to receive the tax credit to be eligible. And there's also a list of which used electric vehicles are eligible for this tax credit that's maintained by the IRS, which we have linked here and in our fact sheet. There will be a QR code at the end of the presentation to download the fact sheet. Let's see. So the third thing about the electric vehicle kind of space and the Inflation Reduction Act is, for the first time, the Inflation Reduction Act or federal law also gives a tax credit for EV charging equipment. Now, for those of us living across the Wasatch Front who aren't in a lower income community, it's not going to apply. But the tax credit does apply for certain low-income communities and non-urban communities. And so the idea behind this is really to help make sure there's a wide availability of EV charging kind of wherever we go, with making sure that lower-income and non-urban communities can benefit as well. Okay, the third step, after we've made our homes efficient, electrified, adopted the infrastructure and the vehicles that don't have a tailpipe emissions, now we can talk about installing clean renewable energy on our home, and what tax credits are available for that. It's important, I think, to consider this kind of stepwise fashion. Some folks may already have on-site renewables and then aren't going to kind of follow these same steps, and that's obviously totally fine. But if someone is starting from scratch at step one, we think that's a good place to start, because after you've made these improvements and you have a sense of how much energy you use, that's the right time to think about, well, how much solar do I need, for example, to install to offset my home's energy use plus my EV, electric vehicle. So that's why we put that as the fourth step, but really, a different set of steps, or a different path through these steps might work for you. So the last step includes renewable energy as well as on-site storage. The residential clean energy tax credit has been on the books. It had a different name previously. This is its new name, and it was also extended through 2032. And similar to the tax credits before, there's a 30% cost kind of target for what the tax credit is available for. However, unlike the efficiency-focused tax credits, there's no cap for the total cost. So it's 30% of whatever your cost is for installing solar, wind, geothermal, heat pumps, fuel cells, solar water heating, or battery storage. Unlike the energy-efficient home improvement tax credit, this tax credit can also be carried forward. If you don't have a big enough kind of tax burden in 1 year to use the whole 30%, you can carry forward what you don't use into future years. That's not true for some reason. Congress decided this. That's not true on the energy efficient side of things, but it is true on the renewable energy tax credit. And again, this just shows that there's really any technology that would be well suited, that's proven, that's available today, that would be an option for your home, will be eligible for this 30% tax credit. And again, it's claimed when you file your federal taxes. So I imagine some folks might be wondering, okay, well, that's a lot of information. That's a lot of tax credits, and there's a lot of different amounts, and how much might I be eligible for? So, sorry, this isn't showing up great on the TV. Hopefully it's showing up better for folks at Zoom, but a national organization that is really been involved in a lot of this stuff, called Rewiring America, put together a really great calculator. So I went to their calculator and I imagined, if I'm a family of 4 and we make $72,000 and I'm a homeowner, what might I be eligible for? It's a little hard to see, but there are so many more financial resources now through the tax credits and the rebate programs that weren't available before, and this just kind of paints a picture of really how much is there. So this also is, these tax credits and the soon-to-be developed rebate programs are in addition to the local rebates that are available from our utilities. Dominion Energy, our gas provider for folks who are doing improvements related to gas efficiency, has a bunch of different utility incentives. Rocky Mountain Power has more and more on the energy efficiency side of things, also incentives for battery storage. So these totals are in addition to those utility rebates as well. If you wanted to take a stab to see what you'd be eligible for, and you're in the room, or you can see this on the screen, you can snap this QR code and go to the Rewiring America calculator, put in a few details, and you'll be able to find out what you're likely to be eligible for. And I wanted to leave a good amount of time for discussion and questions, so that is everything I have prepared.
So at this point in our program, I'm going to invite you to enter our offertory. We'll pass plates around, and I'd like to invite you to greet your neighbor, say hello to the person around you, and then following the offertory, we will go into the Q&A session. So take a few minutes to get to know each other better.
Okay, thank you, everyone. And I think now we're going to transition to the Q&A. I have a bunch of extra slides queued up, so I brought my laptop here just in case there's questions, because I'm sure there's going to be lots of really good questions from this group, because you already know so much. So that's why I brought this down here. But anyway, let's start with the Q&A. Do you have questions or such? There'll be someone bringing out the mic. I'm going to, unfortunately, keep this one. But
Kevin, thank you so much. This was just so informative. I'm really excited to hear about all this. So how does a person doing an energy audit, what kind of qualifications do they have, and how can you get someone that's qualified? How can you find someone to do an energy audit?
Great question. I think I'll just answer the second part of your question. There are lots of different qualifications, but I don't know that the qualifications that I'm aware of are really kind of commonly found among the folks in the Valley. And with these new expanded programs, I think we're going to be seeing some changes. So I guess part of the answer is when the home rebate program gets launched by the state, it'll be very, very easy to find the home auditors. Because that's a required component of that program. But until then, the best place to go is both of our utilities, our investor-owned utilities, Rocky Mountain Power and Dominion Energy. They have incentives right now for a lot of the same kind of stuff. The dollar amounts are quite a bit lower, but they maintain what they call a vendor network. And so you can go to both the Thermwise website or the Wattsmart website, Wattsmart Homes website, and you can go to find a contractor, and that's the best place to go. So yeah, that's what I would suggest.
Is there any kind of financing, special financing that's either government backed for these types of improvements?
Oh, I don't have a slide about that, but I wish I did. So that's one of the many other aspects of Inflation Reduction Act is the greenhouse gas reduction fund. Oh, and I don't remember the $1 billion amount, but there's another many hundreds of billions going to this new program that will be implemented by the EPA called the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. And I don't believe there's a formula allocation like there is with a lot of federal funding, which basically means every state gets a certain amount based on their population. But in this case, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund will be a competitive program, I believe. Actually, thinking about it, we will get, there is I'm not going to go down, I believe it is competitive. Long story short, there isn't any new finance program developed nationwide through the Act, but there's billions of dollars to support financing programs. And actually, in Utah, there's a new independent finance entity that's just being started to position itself to apply for the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund money. And I think we'll see some action on that early next year as well. And we think that's critical. We're coming up with different ideas to share with the folks who are in charge of the financing entity and even our local utilities to come up with some innovative ways to make that money from the federal government through this financing program, make it really work for everyone. So stay tuned, but there will be some new financing programs. There's one up here, and then maybe these two.
Thank you for being here today and giving us all those options. For years now, when we build a house, we want to have a gas dryer, not an electric, and stove, gas, not electric. So when and why is the change to electric everything? And I sort of know we don't want gas, but can you explain that?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. That's a great question. There definitely was a big push decades back to use gas for cooking, and you could use gas for a variety of sources. Probably a little known fact, I wasn't aware of this until just a couple of months ago, but the state of Utah has the highest per capita household percentage that uses gas for space heating across the entire country. So using gas so broadly for different uses, including heating, is less common in other parts of the country, at least as far as space heating goes. To answer your question, though, I mean, gas is a fossil fuel. There's incredibly concerning upstream emission issues when we think about gas combustion. So it's not just the emissions that come from gas combustion, like when we turn on the stove, for example. It's leaks throughout the gas infrastructure, all the gas piping systems, all the way up to where the gas is being extracted. There's a lot of leakage, not of natural gas exactly, but of methane. Methane is an incredibly potent greenhouse gas, which a lot of you may be aware. And a colleague of mine actually at Utah Clean Energy did some research with the University of Utah and found that the amount of methane leakage in our the part of the state that's I'm blanking on right now, where all the natural gas, the Uinta Basin, thank you. The amount of methane leakage releases more methane than Utah's entire fleet of vehicles. So, on an impact to the climate basis. So that's one of the reasons we need to shift off gas so we can avoid all of those upstream leaks and especially those methane leaks in the basin. In addition, there's more and more research about the indoor implications of gas, especially cooking with gas. So there are even when we're not cooking with gas, when the gas stove is off, there are enough leaks oftentimes that there are VOCs and benzene and toluene, I think, and other things that are just present in the air quality in our home, and those are really damaging to our respiratory system. So those are some of the reasons that we are very excited about supporting efficient use of electricity and moving off of gas. There's a question online, and then let's come up here.
There's a question from the Ogden UU Church. Is the real estate industry in Utah on board with increasing home values for homes that have installed energy generation and energy efficiency improvements?
Lee, that should be a topic for next summer's summer forum. For a decade, there's been policy change at the appraisal level to try to develop the right methodology and make it standard practice to capture the value, the improved value that a home receives when renewable energy is installed. I think the answer is yes in some cases, depending on if your appraiser has the right credentials. For good reasons, you can't choose the specific appraiser when you're selling a home and getting a valuation, but you can request that the appraiser that appraises the home has certain qualifications, and they should be using the residential energy efficient addendum or something like that the Appraisal Institute has developed and is available, and that gives appraisers a formula to follow to actually value, the increased value that on-site renewable energy provides.
My name is Mark Mullen. This may be a very naive question. The Supreme Court just weighed in on the Energy Inflation Reduction Act. I've already done most everything on your list except for the battery.
Oh, that's great.
Solar battery. Is that going to affect anything?
I am not familiar with exactly what of the many things the Supreme Court has done recently you're referring to. So I can't say. I know the Supreme Court is looking at things related to the EPA regulating greenhouse gas emissions, but I'm not aware of anything related to the Inflation Reduction Act specifically. Unless there's something I'm missing, I think that's safe. Really, I told Lee earlier I wasn't going to speak to this, but I will. The House that we have in Congress today has passed legislation to repeal most of the Inflation Reduction Act. That's never going to get past the Senate, and the president's never going to sign it. I don't know that the Supreme Court has weighed in on the Inflation Reduction Act specifically, so I think we're good to go. And when a state like Utah is already developing its plan to submit to U.S. Department of Energy to develop these rebate programs, I think we're safe.
I certainly understand the difficulties and the damage from fossil fuels burning, but doesn't the generation of electric, especially the batteries for cars, doesn't that create another set of problems?
Yes, that's another good summer forum topic. There are incredibly devastating environmentally and well as on human beings who are forced to work in bad labor conditions in places across the world, from mining The specialized minerals and materials that go into batteries, that go into solar panels even. There's a cost for everything. One thing that's promising, as I kind of alluded to in the Inflation Reduction Act, is the attempt for new vehicles, the attempt to say only vehicles that meet certain conditions are eligible for that tax credit. And that's not going to solve everything, but and I don't know the details. I can't speak to it, but I think you're absolutely right. There are problems with environmentally and labor-wise and human rights with respect to the extraction of rare earth minerals and things that we need for these new energy technologies. So it's something we all need to be aware of and address those solutions at the same time as we're decarbonizing.
Does Utah Clean Energy currently recommend solar panel installers? I had some installed 10 years ago, and the company that I had do it is now out of business.
Yeah.
I need an update. And if not your company, can you recommend some place where we can go to get recommendation?
I would love to give you a few recommendations. Do you want to just come chat with me afterwards? We, as a nonprofit, we don't endorse any specific companies. Okay. But there are several companies that have been around the longest, even with some changes of ownership in one of them. And I'd be happy to give you recommendations.
Thank you.
There's another question online.
What would you suggest would be the best way to publicize these rebates to our low-income communities?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. Well, I'll try to keep the answer brief. One of our priorities as an organization, and one reason we want more community members to weigh in with the State Office of Energy Development, is to really convey the importance of not just having a group of a dozen energy policy experts, or even energy engineers, or even companies that implement these energy efficiency rebate programs from the utility, get together and kind of come up with a plan and the design of how the plan should work. Or how the program should work, kind of by themselves. We think that the development of these programs needs to be done with input from the community, especially communities who are historically underrepresented. So that's one. Folks, those communities who typically they're underrepresented in these kind of decision making, their needs need to be taken into account. We actually have a project with the US EPA, a collaborative problem-solving project, where we're trying to bridge that gap a little bit, but there's a lot more that the state needs to do. So talking with folks like West Side Coalition, like University Neighborhood Partners, groups like the IRC, the International Rescue Committee, affordable housing organizations. The list is plentiful, but consulting with those organizations and getting feedback from community members who serve to benefit the most and really need the resources the most, they need to be involved in putting together the plan. I'll just leave it there.
Hi, thank you, Kevin. I know you professionally, and I never put together work, Kevin, with Church Kevin, so
cool.
Thanks for bridging that. Yeah. I was wondering how much of our energy is First Church offsetting with our solar? How far away are we from net zero by 2030? Mm-hmm. Do we have a path? And if we don't, is there anything I can do to help facilitate that?
Let's see. I'm not sure, and it's in progress, and yes. So we are currently collecting our our updated church's energy baseline. So we know how much energy are we using, and how much gas are we using, how much solar are we generating, which we do know, and then what's our plan to decarbonize. So we actually have a small team that's part of the facilities committee and working closely with the environmental ministry to make sure that we develop a plan to go from today to by 2030 meet that goal. And I'd love to talk after to collaborate. And I'm just so excited about that we're going to do that here as well.
Hi, thanks, Kevin, for addressing us.
Welcome.
I'm a progressive, and I like to think that I'm informed, but I didn't know a lot of this information. I'm going to have to pull up the YouTube and watch it all over again. But how do we I get so frustrated with liberals. They come up with a good program like this, and it actually gets passed. But I've got to think that most of the public knows nothing about it. we need to educate them, because on the flip side, the right wing is, the oil industry and all that, they're going to be fighting this all the time. The Utah legislature is going to say this is a giveaway to whoever, and it'll raise your taxes and cost jobs in the oil and gas industry. Yeah. And this, to me, seems like affirmative action for renewables. So can you respond to both how we promote the good and counter the bad?
Gosh, I think that's, I don't know how people say that's above my pay grade kind of an answer. I wish I knew the answer to that, although I will say that from what we understand, we work as much as we can with the executive branch and the legislature to try to make progress on these items. Our understanding is that the state of Utah, the executive branch, is going after every federal resource that they can. The state's Office of Energy Development is actively putting together a plan. So we're I don't think Utah is in a place where we're at risk of not receiving these benefits and the access to these programs. And I don't have a lot of wisdom except to say that we're talking with a lot of the different players and stakeholders in the kind of the energy space, in our utilities, with our local governments, to make sure that anytime anybody thinks about something related to their home, whether or not it's paying their electricity bill or making some kind of random improvement, that folks can't not see that there's a lot of financial rebates available for a lot of those improvements, whether or not that's at the DIY home improvement store or like on your utility bill. So I share the same concern. Like, we need to make sure everyone's aware of this. And at the minimum, some of the big players that have a role in some of those decisions need to be broadcasting that information as well. Tim.
Kevin, thank you. Where are we with regard to battery technology to the point where individual homes are sufficiently at zero so they can sell power back to the grid?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question, Tim. And I guess where are we at is there are a number of battery manufacturers and batteries available today that are readily available. They've come down in price extremely dramatically over the last 10 years, and they're still quite expensive. As an organization, we support all sorts of different things. One of the things we got behind and tried to help shape was Rocky Mountain Power's inclusion of a new rebate program that Rocky Mountain Power offers to its customers to install batteries. I would say that's the first place to go. They allow Sonnen and Solar Edge batteries to be eligible for their rebate. They have the biggest rebate probably in the country that's given by a utility to help customers install batteries. The string attached, if you will, it's more of a wire. Sorry, that's my attempt to make a joke. I'm really bad at making jokes. The string attached is Rocky Mountain Power, in order to receive the incentive, requires access to the battery. And that might feel kind of like concerning to some people. I think it's a really good thing. We want an electric grid that is very flexible, that when there's more renewables being generated by the plant in the the Tooele Valley that can come onto our grid, that we use more power. And then when we have less renewables coming onto the grid, that we use less power and we pull from our batteries. So we think it's really important. I think it's really important for all homes to have batteries, all businesses to have batteries. It's going to be at least on the plan for consideration for First Church. And in the end, Rocky Mountain Power, so far, they have, I don't know if it's thousands yet, but many hundreds of batteries enrolled in their program. The utility is interacting with the batteries for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, maybe a couple of minutes to provide benefits to the electric grid today. So it's not something that's going to, they're not going to take over your battery. But the utility grid benefits when we have renewables and lots of battery storage kind of throughout the grid. That's another summer forum topic, to have like a utility engineer come and talk about all the really cool metering things that they're doing here in Utah. So thanks for the question.
From your inside perspective, what do you think are the chances of us getting off of coal?
Okay, I knew I brought these slides for a reason. Yes. Okay, bear with me. So this is kind of hard to read, but this orange segment is the percentage of renewables that's providing electricity to Pacific Corp, which is Rocky Mountain Power's parent company, to the 6-state region that Utah's a part of. Coal is black. So today we're at 39%. And you can see by 2032, we're at 3%. This graphic comes from Pacific Corp and Rocky Mountain Power's 20-year plan. Now, this applies to just the part of Utah that's covered by Rocky Mountain Power. The good news is that's about 85% of the state. And this includes the whole 6-state service territory that Pacific Corp covers. The good news is their 20-year plan proposes to close coal plants 10 years sooner than they were already planning. So we're going to be at 90%, in the 2033 timeframe, we're going to be about 90% clean energy, non-fossil fuel-based energy. And if you look all the way out to the 2040 timeframe, there's zero coal. So this is the plan. Hasn't happened yet, but it is happening. So I think I saw you were clapping. That totally deserves an applause. This is the reality. There's also, there's also this like kind of bright green. It's kind of hard to read this. It doesn't really show up on this, but Rocky Mountain Power is using batteries and energy efficiency as energy resources as well, because they plan on, that's part of their planning. So it's happening. And this is in part because of the work that groups like ours and other organizations around the region have pushed for years to have Rocky Mountain Power accelerate the closing of fossil fuel plants. And so it's happening. There's another question online, and then this gentleman.
Another comment from Ogden. Kevin, thank you for presenting. The Electron project near Tooele, do you know their status or have any kind of progress report?
I wish I knew the exact status. The Electron project, I don't want to get it wrong. It's a big wind plant, solar plant, and I'm sorry to disappoint the question asker. I could say what I think the answer is, but I'm not sure if it's the Electron or a different project. So there are a number of projects that are being developed in the valley and around the state on behalf of either large energy users or collaborations of energy users. I think Electron is one that will bring solar power to a large group, including Salt Lake City, and all of its municipal operations. So all of Salt Lake City's municipal operations won't just be provided with a decreasingly fossil fuel-based grid, but will actually be offset with solar. There are a number of other projects around the state in the region that are coming online, but I don't have the specific answer. Let's do one more, and then Lee.
We can do 2 more questions.
Okay, one here.
I see a lot of ads and get a lot of phone calls for solar panels. But let us come put them on your house for free. Mm-hmm. What's the deal?
Proceed with caution. Get 2 to 3 bids. Question these is not what's the deal, but these are my recommendations. Very carefully scrutinize their forecasted utility rates. A lot of folks. I mean, there are some really good solar companies out there, and there are some that make outrageous claims and use highly inflated, like 10-year utility rate increase projections. We are going to see probably some increases in electric rates, but not to the scale that they're arguing. So I would say get a few bids. you could absolutely start with Utah Clean Energy's website and start with some of the contractors on our list. If you could navigate to, we have a website called the Utah Energy Hub, and I'm pretty sure we recently updated a list of solar contractors that we know are real. And again, if anyone wants, an idea of 3 companies to talk with, I'm happy to give you some, recommendations one-on-one. And last question.
Okay, so do states have to actively accept these programs in order to get the money? That is, could a state like Florida, Texas, or let's just say for argument's sake, Wyoming, say, no, we don't want this because we want to protect our coal resources?
Yes. For a lot of these federal programs and funding, states can, and some have flatly said, I think there's 4 states that, not for this program, but for a different program, have said, we don't want this funding. Utah, in addition to putting together a plan for these rebate programs, Utah, through the Department of Environmental Quality, is receiving a separate set of funds that will be used to develop a state priority climate action plan, I think is what it's called. Utah has applied for those funds. And I guess I just want to acknowledge, even though I disagree with that, there are some communities that are really struggling with how to transition to a low-carbon economy. And I think it's really important that we humanize the humans that are part of the old energy system and know that they need a lot of support, and they need financial resources, they might need training, they might need high-speed internet, they have a lot of other needs. Now, when it comes to the politicians who are really kind of weaponizing that issue, that's a whole different story, and it's inexcusable, and this transition is happening. And I guess, long story short is, I think Utah's in a really good position to take advantage of the resources that are available to states. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here.
So a couple quick housekeeping announcements before we break for coffee hour. Mark's comment was absolutely spot on. Thank you, Tristan, and Tristan Moore, our tech director, will post this whole presentation, so you'll have another chance to capture this QR code in the YouTube recording. Give Tristan a couple days to get that up. Thank you. I would be remiss if I didn't tell you what's coming next week. Beck Miller, a member of our church, is doing a talk on a transformed life, 10 lessons I've learned as a trans man. I think that's the current title. Do I have that title right? Okay. Got it? Steve's hosting next week, right, Steve? Okay. And just before we break for our coffee hour, I'm sure Tristan will take care of that upload. But I think Kevin will be available to answer more questions in coffee hour. And I want to invite you to stop by and see the tables that are set up. Environmental Ministry has a table, and my wife, Linda Smith, is going to make one last table announcement.
Thanks. This isn't a table announcement so much as a reminder that our church has partnered with Crossroads Urban Center, a nonprofit that has a food pantry and advocacy program. And the summer months are the worst months for food insecurity, mostly because schools are closed. And so during the month of July, Crossroads Urban Center is sponsoring, amongst its church partners, a contest called the Golden Celery Contest. And if we bring in the most cans during the month of July, we could win a highly desirable gold can of celery, as I understand it. It could be displayed. So I want to thank half a dozen of you that brought in cans today. Every Sunday during July, bring in your cans. We're collecting them in a bin by the social justice table, and there's another bin in the RE building. So every month during July, this is our chance to show our strength as Unitarians in donating to the hungry. Thank you.